Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to another video. Welcome to another Jane Austen July video, and today I'm going to be doing a Jane Austen Choose Your Own Adventure. So I have here this book, You Are Elizabeth Bennet by Emma Campbell Webster, which is a Jane Austen themed, Pride and Prejudice themed choose your own adventure, which I think sounds pretty fun. So I thought I would read / do this choose your own adventure today and see where I end up and make a video out of it. Jack from Spread Bookjoy did a similar video a year or two ago with this book, though under a different name. I think this was republished last year, and I really enjoyed watching her video and seeing where she ended up within the world of Pride and Prejudice, so I thought I would give this a go myself. So this is going to be, I guess, somewhere between a reading vlog and a review, and I will get stuck into the book. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a young Austen heroine must be in want of a husband, and you are no exception. Right, so I've come to the first decision point in the book. I should say, I think this video will contain lots of spoilers from Pride and Prejudice and possibly some other Jane Austen novels, because I assume we're going to go through some of the plot of Pride and Prejudice, and glancing to the next page, I have seen some names of some characters from some other Jane Austen novels, so, you know, proceed at your peril. So far, we have had the first sort of assembly within Pride and Prejudice, and we've had Jane's visit to Netherfield where she's fallen ill, and I / Elizabeth Bennet / the reader of this Choose Your Own Adventure novel, I'm on my way to Netherfield to visit Jane. I'm walking on my way and I've come into a field I don't recognise. So I have a choice to make. I can take the path to the left or the path to the right, and I think I'm going to go on the path to the right, which takes me to page 22. Let's see what happens next. I've come to another decision point. We've got through most of the Netherfield visit without incident, and Jane now appears to be better. So the three options I have are trust in her improved appearance and urge Jane to borrow Mr. Bingley's carriage immediately. Suggest Jane takes advantage of the restorative properties of fresh air and exercise by walking back the way you came, or stay a few days longer to ensure Jane is fully recovered. I feel like walking back sounds dangerous and like that will make Jane ill, so I think let's stay a few days longer to ensure Jane is fully recovered, which means I have to go back to page 7, which I'm pretty sure is the page where I saw some names of some characters not in Pride and Prejudice, so I feel like I've made a good choice. Okay, so things have taken quite a turn. While Jane and I were staying at Netherfield, Henry and Mary Crawford arrived along with their friend Mr. Yates. Mr. Yates seems to own Mansfield Park in this story for some reason. And then the story merges into the amateur dramatics sequence in Mansfield Park. And Elizabeth doesn't want to act, as Fanny doesn't want to act in Mansfield Park, which seems very out of character for Elizabeth. I think she'd be quite up for acting, unlike Fanny, but there we go. And ultimately Mr. Crawford is in love with us. Mr. Crawford has made an offer, so now we have to decide whether to accept Mr. Crawford or deem him unworthy and continue on with our lives. I think, in the true spirit of a Jane Austen heroine, and also because I think it will be a more interesting plot and not end the story too soon, I think I'm gonna refuse Mr. Crawford, which means I have to turn to page 53 quite a lot later on in the story. Let's see what happens now. So having rejected Mr. Crawford, I got back onto the plot of Pride and Prejudice, and We've been through Mr. Collins's arrival and the introduction of Mr. Wickham, and Mr. Wickham complaining about Mr. Darcy's treatment of him, and then we've come to the Netherfield ball. We've had the Netherfield ball and Elizabeth and Darcy dancing there, and then we have got to the next day and Mr. Collins proposing. So the question is, am I going to accept or refuse Mr. Collins? And I think probably, as I have some dignity, I had better refuse Mr. Collins. And I also feel like it'll be quite fun working through this book to just refuse as many proposals of marriage as possible. But I kind of want to know what happens if you accept Mr. Collins in this story. So I might go and read the section where you accept Mr. Collins, and I assume that will be the end of the story. So then I will go back and reject his offer and continue. But I am kind of curious. So let's see what happens if you accept Mr. Collins. Okay, so quite a wild turn in the story if you accept Mr. Collins. First, we have an excellent scene between Mr. Bennet and his daughter, which I really enjoyed, in which Mr. Bennet gives her some advice about the best way to be happy with Mr. Collins. And he says, your greatest chance of happiness lies in creating for yourself a library as soon as is possible after your arrival at Hunsford, which I did find amusing. And then ultimately what happens is that Elizabeth murders Mr. Collins in a fit of rage, and then makes his death look like an accident. And as there are no other male heirs, Longbourn stays with her family, apparently, which is quite wild. However, as I said, I don't think that my intention is to accept Mr. Collins. I was just curious to see what happened, especially because so far I feel like I've mostly been sticking to the plot of Pride and Prejudice. So I'm going to reject Mr. Collins' offer and continue with the story from then onwards. And so I have to go to page 62. Right, I've reached another decision, having successfully rejected Mr. Collins. Now I have been, seeing plenty of Wickham and so on. Mr. Bingley has left Netherfield, and Jane is being encouraged to go to London or perhaps to Bath. So we have three options here. So either I let Jane go to London on her own, as in Pride and Prejudice, or I decide to go to London with her, or I tell Jane that she should stay away from London and the Bingleys and take the waters at Bath, and I assume go with Jane. And I love Bath, so I would like to go to Bath. So let's do that. It looks like I'm going to encounter some of the characters from Northanger Abbey, so that's going to be fun. So to catch you up with what's been happening to my character, I went to Bath with Jane and my aunt and uncle, and then I met Mr. Henry Tilney and was ultimately invited to Northanger Abbey and carried out some of the plot of Northanger Abbey, and got caught snooping around Northanger Abbey with suspicions of the general's behaviour. I will say that while it's really fun sort of combining in lots of different elements from different Jane Austen novels, actually the heroines of Jane Austen's novels are all really different, and Elizabeth Bennet very much would not make the same mistakes that Catherine Morland does. So does that quite work? Maybe not. I also then, after being, ejected from Northanger Abbey, was sent back home to Longbourn, and the page I went back to said that Jane was in London, even though Jane had been in Bath in the path I've been on. So it's obviously not completely perfect, but I imagine it must be an absolute nightmare to edit a choose your own adventure story. As a copy editor, that seems like an absolute hell of a project. So anyway, I've now been invited by the gardeners to go to the lakes, and in order to decide if I'm ready for the Lake District, I've been given 3 questions. Which of the following best describes you? A. You are not really fond of nettles, thistles or heath blossom. You prefer tall and flourishing trees to those which are crooked and blasted, neat to ruined cottages, and snug farmhouses to Gothic watchtowers. B. You are fond of nettles and thistles but not heath blossoms, and though you quite like Gothic watchtowers in principle, you wouldn't want to live in one. C. You have read William Gilpin's essay on the picturesque 40 times over and admire a good view so much that if it were interrupted by something that did not perfectly accord with your idea of the picturesque, you would immediately set about destroying it, even if that something were the entire city of Bath. So definitely not C, because I love the city of Bath very much. I also am not a big fan of nettles. I wouldn't say I'm in general someone who loves sort of Gothic picturesque, so I think let's go for A, which means I need to turn to page 114. As I have no appreciation of the picturesque at all and are woefully unprepared for a trip to the Lake District, I need to get a copy of William Gilpin's essays and then proceed up north, but only once I've read them 5 times, apparently. So now I have to go back to page 108, and I guess I'll find out what happens there. Well, as I didn't go to the lakes because I wasn't suitably prepared and didn't value the picturesque enough, I therefore ended up instead going to Kent to see Mr. Collins and Charlotte, and therefore I have got back on track with the plot of Pride and Prejudice. I've met Mr. Darcy again, and Mr. Darcy has proposed. So the question is, am I going to accept his proposal or not? And I'm kind of curious to know what happens if I accept, partly because what I want to happen is it to turn into the plot of Unequal Affections by Laura Almstone, which is a great retelling I very much enjoy, where Elizabeth accepts Mr. Darcy's first proposal. Expector's going to tell me that I've lost the game because the mission that I was set at the beginning of the book was to marry for love and prudently, rather than just prudently. So I'm going to turn to page 132, which is accepting Mr. Darcy's proposal, but I expect that may be game over and I may end up returning to this page in order to reject Mr. Darcy, so I'm going to stick a bookmark in there in the meantime and we will see what happens. So what happens if Mr. Darcy is accepted is that our heroine, Elizabeth Bennet, marries Mr. Darcy, not really knowing him. They don't know each other very well. And then she begins an affair with a local farmer called Robert Martin. And when the affair is discovered, her life is ruined. So there we go. Let's return to page 103, because I don't want this to be quite over yet. And I will continue to page 119. I hope that there are more ways to win this book than just the plot of Pride and Prejudice. Like, I feel like there should be ways to marry someone else that are also like acceptable. I feel like you shouldn't just have to choose the Pride and Prejudice path, but so far it seems to be just taking me on the Pride and Prejudice path. Like, even when I went on the Northanger Abbey path for a bit, I don't think Henry Tilney's going to turn up again. I think I'm just now back on the Pride and Prejudice path. Anyway, I will continue and see. So far, I feel like this is quite fun, and it's a bit of a strange reading experience because I feel like all the bits that have been the most fun are the bits that are not the story of Pride and Prejudice. You know, it's, well, what would happen if this would happen? But they all, like, immediately end the story. And I guess part of the fun of a choose your own adventure is that you don't just actually finish it when you finish one path. You then go back and try another path. But I feel like in order to make the right decisions to, like, win the game, you therefore just get the plot of Pride and Prejudice, which, you know, will be better in the form of Pride and Prejudice. And it's really the, like, other random bits and pieces and other paths you can take that are the fun bit. So I don't know. Anyway. I do feel like there are some obvious places to have a decision point that aren't decision points. So, for example, having rejected Mr. Darcy, I'm just following the course of the plot of Pride and Prejudice. I've received Mr. Darcy's letter, and here we have the sort of conversation between Jane and Elizabeth about whether or not to expose Wickham's character, and it says, you decide not to divulge Wickham's character to anyone else. But actually, I think that would be a really fun decision point, because it would be interesting to see how the plot of Pride and Prejudice would be different if Elizabeth and Jane exposed Mr. Wickham as the person he is, and then Lydia probably wouldn't run off with him. Like, could we save Lydia here? But that's not a decision point, which I think is a shame. So I do feel like there's a few things like that where it would be nice to have a decision point that could like tweak the plot of Pride and Prejudice in an interesting way. But anyway. So come to decision point. It's not a decision point that's in Pride and Prejudice. It's just like, Lydia's gone to Brighton, I've decided to take a walk. Do I go and visit Aunt Phillips, or do I go to the Lucases? And I do think like choosing whether or not to tell everyone about Wickham would be a more interesting decision point. But there we go. I guess I will pick at random, and I guess I will call upon the Lucases. Oh look, and it appears that Mr. Knightley is at the Lucases, so that's exciting. I haven't reached a decision point, but I feel you should all know that having called upon the Lucases at Lucas Lodge, I have ended up in the plot of Emma. I am now good friends with Mr. Knightley and have met Frank Churchill, etc. And I guess we'll follow the course of Emma for a bit. I do enjoy the fact that the characters of Maria Lucas from Pride and Prejudice and Harriet Smith from Emma have been combined into one. I think that's really fun. I kind of wish there was a bit more of the combining, because I think that's a really like fun element if you're going to bring in plot elements from another Jane Austen, and I feel like there has been quite a lot of that, but not very much combining so far. I feel like that's a fun element, but I guess I will find out now what happens and whether or not I can win this novel by marrying Mr. Knightley rather than Mr. Darcy. And Mr. Knightley is great, so you know, let's see how I go. So having followed along the plot of Emma for a while, I have indeed been proposed to by Mr. Knightley, and now I have to decide whether or not to accept. And I think we can all agree that Mr. Knightley is an excellent character, and therefore I'm going to accept and turn to page 156, where I have successfully completed my mission. You marry Mr. Knightley and remove to Donwell Abbey to settle into your new life. A short while after your wedding, you hear that Mr. Darcy has married Miss Bingley, and you feel a small pang of something like regret, though you chastise yourself for your foolish feelings. You put it from your mind as soon as possible and learn to be happy with Mr. Knightley. I love the idea that if Elizabeth marries someone else, Mr. Darcy ends up married to Miss Bingley. Poor Mr. Darcy. I think that's highly unlikely, judging from his character, but there we go. I have successfully completed my mission. I feel like I'm mostly going to stop there, but I am going to have a quick flick through to see what other endings I could have got. Curious to know how many of the Austen heroes you could end up marrying reading this book. Or whether there's just like a couple that you could end up with. So yeah, I'm going to have a quick flick through, but I think I've come to the end of my journey. I've completed my mission, and I'm satisfied with that. Okay, I had a flick through some of the rest of the endings. So you can end up married to Captain Wentworth, you can end up murdered by Caroline Bingley, or you can end up choosing to have a different fate. I'm not going to explain the last one because I think it's really fun, and I feel like that is a spoiler. Obviously, I've been like quite free with spoilers for this book because it's mostly just bits of the novels of Jane Austen, but I really like the last like few pages and one of the like final possibilities. So I won't tell you about that. But in general, I thought this was really good fun. Like I say, I think there were a few places where it would have been nice to have a decision moment where we weren't given one, and some of the sort of side quests where you're following bits of different Jane Austen novels don't quite align with the character of Elizabeth Elizabeth Bennet and how you've been like behaving in other sections, but overall I thought this was good fun. It reminded me of the board game Marrying Mr. Darcy, which is a very fun board game that I highly recommend if you ever get the chance to play it with some fellow Austen fans. So yeah, I think that's all for now. I hope this has been a relatively fun video. I have no idea whether this is a long video or a short video. I guess I will see what happens as I edit it together, but I'm pretty happy with my overall fate. Married to Mr. Knightley seems pretty good to me. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.